My name is Randy Hines. I own and operate the Kolache Shop here in Houston, Texas. And I was born and raised originally an hour southwest of Houston, eating kolaches. And for those of you who don't know what that is a Czech pastry, traditionally just sweet filled. So with things like apricot or cottage cheese. But when the Czech immigrants brought their pastries to Texas in the 1800s, many Texans began putting other things in the dough besides just apricot and cottage cheese. They put jalapeno and sausage. And so now we serve a whole variety of variations of kolache. So in short, it's a Czech pastry with various kinds of fillings, closed face or open face. And I've been running and operating the Kolache Shop since 2014. And so how I got into that, in short, is I started my career as a CPA in Houston in 2001 and at a big public accounting firm. And so I was given a lot of opportunity to learn and grow with them, which was great. I, for the most part, enjoyed the people I worked with. I certainly enjoyed the travel and experiencing other parts of the country and even international travel, which was really eye-opening for me, having grown up in a very rural, small farming community in El Campo, Texas. And I did that until around 2004. I made a short little change. I decided I needed a change of scenery, change of pace. I spent a year in San Antonio doing similar work, but for a big corporation there. That was great. I liked that as well, but something was really missing for me. And so it kind of began a multi-year search for what is my vocation? What is my career path? What do I want to do? And there are many, many winding roads in there that I won't elaborate too much on, but they led me to Washington, D.C. for a bit, studying theology, and it's where I met my future wife. And so at some point in there, I just realized that outside of Houston, many people did not have the luxury of knowing what a kolache was or enjoying them like I did. And even in Houston, although there were some places doing a pretty good job, I felt like they weren't doing what I had grown up with in the rural Texas. And so the idea came to me that perhaps I could bring a slice of my nostalgic childhood and my childhood passion for this Czech pastry into the heart of Houston in a way that it was not yet. So it was there, certainly, but not the way that I had experienced it growing up. And so I got to know the owner of the Kolache Shop, which was founded in 1970. So it had already been around many, many years. It was the closest iteration of a kolache to my upbringing. So the older gentleman who ran it, he and I kind of became fast friends. I think I liked his grandfatherliness. I liked his passion. I liked his long history, and I think he liked my youthfulness at the time. I would say there was no shining light or giant overnight revelation. It was really just years of kind of coming and seeing various paths. So what I mean by that is I spent all in about 10 years working as a CPA, doing various kinds of work, most especially audit compliance work. So I certainly gave that a good run and spent many years trying different angles of that kind of work. And geographically, I spent time traveling abroad and living in different cities and just making sure I give it a fair shake. So I would say for me, after those many years of working, it was very clear to me that that was not what stirred my soul. It's not what I found myself really excited about. I would say I was good at it. I did not find myself to be like phenomenal at it. I certainly was competent, but not more than that. And I saw the people above me, and for the most part, not always, but for the most part, I could appreciate their uniqueness and their aptness for making this a career. but in the same moment, I could look at them and say, that's definitely not me, right? I knew I was not like the ones doing that. So I could respect them from a distance, and at the same time say, that's not my, my calling. I didn't know what my calling was. I just knew it wasn't that. And so that began this kind of co-exploration. So as I'm working and being a good worker and doing my duties, I'm also exploring these other ideas about, it wasn't just certainly owning a bakery was not some of the early ideas I had. I thought about academia. I thought about going back and teaching accounting. The CPA work was not the best fit for me, was not the best use of my skill set, although I still respected and appreciated the studies that I did and the work that I did. And then the bakery really was just fortuitous. It just, but I would say, again, it came up because I simply put myself out there and in a way, let things kind of roll around a bit. And once we took over, of course, things can get very challenging very quickly because neither of us had any food experience. So I would say that was Jay. We've spoken about this before, but one of my favorite authors, Wendell Berry, speaks of the muse of inspiration and the muse of realization, the muse of reality, right? So the muse of inspiration, in a way, was what brought me to this venture, and fortunately so. But it was the muse of the muse of realization. In Wendell Berry's words, he says it's that muse that always makes you realize, oh, things are harder than I thought they were going to be. And so I would say that we began that trajectory April 1st of 2014, and I've been on that one for the past 8 years.
Do you feel like you understand it all now?
Oh no, we don't understand. We certainly understand it better than we did. We think back to that first year and how much you just don't know. And to use kind of the phrase that you hear a lot, we knew we didn't know a lot, and there was even more that we didn't know that we didn't know, right? So a giant blank canvas of things. But the fact is, when your back is against the wall, you simply make it happen. What you don't have in experience or expertise or efficiency, you simply conquer through brute force of time and energy and just tenacity. And that's something we didn't lack. My wife and I, we just fought it tooth and nail, and we had lots of mistakes, and that we just tried really hard, committed the whole of ourselves with 3 young children at the time. And so that was certainly a challenging time. But again, when your back's against the wall, you realize you can do things that maybe you didn't think you could. But like most situations like that, the learning curve is very steep. And so you learn very quickly, and you start plugging holes. There are many holes. Some are big, some are small. You just start plugging.
How do you maximize those relationships so that it's not purely transactional all the time?
Yeah, well, yeah, a few comments. So the first would be going back to 2014, muse of inspiration, muse of realization. Lucy and I mean, couldn't have even fathomed how difficult the food industry was going to be. So much so that if we'd known fully then, probably we wouldn't have done it. Not to say we regret it. We don't regret it. We're in it now. But you can't even fathom. There's so many constraints that you kind of put a fine point on it. So you're being pulled in so many directions. And even if you're a ruthless, amoral person, it can be stressful, much less a person trying to balance, to use a phrase that I know I've shared with you before, Jay, from a document about being a Catholic leader, a business leader, right? And what the mission is. And so they say, making goods that are actually good and providing services that actually serve. You would think that's just simply a given, but it's not. There are people who don't care if their good is actually good, or if their services, are disserved. It doesn't matter. They just want the dollar. And if you're the kind of person who these things matter to, the tension is significant. And so my response to that would be, and Jay, I like the way you said it. You said, how can you keep it from being transactional all the time? Thank you for leaving room in there for the fact that sometimes it is transactional, right? Sometimes it is transactional. And whether you're dealing with your food vendor who on their own end is also trying to and get as much money from you as they possibly can and increase prices on you. And so sometimes it does come down to a negotiation with your provider. Clearly, it's to both of our benefit that I exist and thrive for a long time, and that they exist and thrive for a long time. And so, keeping that in mind, but back to the employee, I mean that's kind of again kind of the innermost circle is your employee, because they're the ones you're seeing mostly. And so, I'll say, for example, we're very small still. We don't offer health insurance, for example. We don't offer 401k, and these are typically things that come with companies that have become much bigger. They're much more common benefits from a larger company that now has enough cash flow coming through that they can offer those things to attract and retain people. Like most small businesses, we're not there yet. We'd love to be. So begs the question, well, what can you do? Well, the main thing we can do is, there are several main things that we can do and that we try to do. Number one is, I was taught by a former boss of mine years ago. He says, I try to just pay above market, period. I just want to pay not double market, but 10% above market, so that no one can ever leave saying, well, I'm making 80% of 75% of the market. So I want to attract and retain the right people. I've got to be willing to put my money where my mouth is. So giving value for value received. It's a statement I say to all my employees. I wouldn't say repetitively, but a lot. I will give you value for value received, so that if you are giving me the value of your life energy, your time, your inspiration, your intellect, I will bring you value. And again, not in terms of health benefits or health insurance or 401ks, but in terms of hourly wage plus the tips that they get. Part of my responsibility is to create an environment, ambiance, design, ingredient, music, wardrobe, that makes a customer really very delighted to come in and buy a pastry. So much so that they're more willing and ready and able to provide a tip, which goes right to the bottom line of my employees' pay. So that's kind of a long answer to the first part. The second part is a little more a little less analytical, in the sense of it's just the relationship, right? You're human, they're human. At the end of the day, you're all leaving this business and going to do the normal things that people do. So you're washing clothes and hopefully eating with some loved ones in some form or fashion, whether it's your kids or your parents or aunts, uncles, or whoever. And I always have wanted them to know that that's also me. I'm not business owner Randy at night. I'm not your boss at night. Like, I'm just Randy in this specific season of my life. I'm Randy, husband and father, and Randy guy who wants to see his children happy, just like my workers probably want to see their children happy, or to see their parents cared for in their old age, or to see families stay intact, or to have some time to ponder or experience leisure in some form or fashion. So that gets into I offer a little bit of paid time off, not a lot. It's not 15 days a year, but it's enough that can give you some peace of mind, so you can take that family trip that you'd wanted to, and not worry about, can I pay rent because I'm not making any money this week. No, you'll make money. You'll make some money because I've got some paid time off for you, or granting that time off, even if it means I'm having to cover your shift, or some family member just passed away. Okay, we'll take care of it. And how much time do you need? And so I would say just trying to act like an actual human being, acting as if you live near these people. You wouldn't act in a nefarious way with your neighbor. At least hopefully most people would not, because it's their own backyard. So I guess that's what I would say, is that tense. It's constantly tense, because that eats into your own bottom line sometimes, for example. And I'd say not just the bottom line of your money, but the bottom line of your time, which is equally valuable, as we all know. So to me, as a father and husband, I would say the bottom line of my time is often more valuable than the bottom line of my P&L, my profit and loss statement. Not taking anything away from people who have trouble, paying the electricity bill. That's real. We've done okay enough to pay rent, so to speak. But all this to say that that's where the rubber hits the road, is because sometimes it requires a real investment of your person, your money, your time, your mental bandwidth. And but the question becomes, are we doing this for the long haul or not? And if we are, ultimately, you want to provide these people with meaningful work in an environment that they are delighted to come to, so that they then delight the guests who are delighted to, continue serving us through their purchases and their tips, et cetera. And so it's what people call instead of the race to the bottom, the race to the top. Sorry, I lost my words for a second, but the race to the bottom is the easier one. Many people run that race. Perhaps even all of us have had temptations to run it as well. But the harder race is the race to the top. And I have found that the harder you work at that, the lonelier it is, in a good way, right? Less competition. And so I find that in that sense, it kind of bears its own fruit. If you just put the work in to be a good human being and meet people where they're at, give mercy when it's required, also give discipline when it's required as well. People will take advantage of you if you let them. And so I don't know how more scientific to put it, again, just simply trying to be a real human being. Yeah, I studied theology, and the dean at the institute where I studied was a really amazing man. And he would often say, I fully expect that many of you, at least in the master's program that I was in specifically, that many of you will go on and not pursue some higher education in theology or just teach theology. I would want and expect many of you to go back into the heart of the world and be lawyers and entrepreneurs and accountants and bakers. Because, he said, my reading is that, Jesus came into the world and went to the heart of it to try to transform it from within, or not try to, but to be Jesus Christ in the heart of the world. So I would just say that going into it, probably like many people, again, back to the two muses, perhaps maybe we had false notions about what we were capable of carrying out. And so is that, for example, we're going to buy all local produce and local eggs from farms where we know they treat the people and the animals well, and pay our employees well beyond minimum, and you get into it and realize, well, the constraints are simply too tight. We're not capable of doing that. And so I would just say that I think the way it's morphed over time has been probably just the ideas, which can get lofty. This is the beauty of ideas; they can do that. The inspiration of, but at the same time, understanding that running a Catholic business is not simply having a picture of the Pope on the wall, for example. It's not playing Christian radio. I'm not suggesting that you'd never do that. I'm just saying at the heart of it, it's not changing the color of the caps that you wear. The question is, are you trying to transform the logic of the transaction from the inside out? And then that's not my language. That's the language of the dean that I studied under. This was his whole point, was to try to enter into things as deeply as Jesus did. And we all know that he went to the heart, right? There was no part of the universe. Even St. Paul says that all creation groans, right? The whole cosmos, as it were. And so I'm not suggesting that, Lucy and I, we're regularly doing that. I would just say in the back of our mind, we know that's the call. I heard someone say recently that, I'm a Christian, but I just can't keep up, in humility. So I would just say we don't always keep up, so to speak. There are times we might make a decision and later on say, well, that didn't really feel right, or I don't think that really lived up to our calling. But I would say it is always there in our minds and our forefront of our eyes, of like, we know we're not just like out making money, and therefore only living the logic of the market. Again, to use the word you said, Jay, just purely transactional. So I would say for us, being, practicing Catholics, just trying to make sure that we are going beyond just the transactional, at least most of the time. Again, to use your words, most of the time, whether it's your employee relationship, even my vendors, even the vendors who you could tell are used to just pulling the wool over your eyes, and just trying to be human with them as well, and not going on some cursing tirade of them. And maybe it's being firm and direct with them, but showing that you can act with dignity. They're still people at the end of the day, and so that's what I would say is that's our faith in the business has matured. It is forced, I would say, it has forced us to take a harder look at what sacrifices might our faith be asking of us. And where we find that the most difficult is that if we were a married couple with no children, perhaps it'd be easier to say, we'll simply sacrifice more for the business. We'll sacrifice more in this situation for this employee, or we can go with without more for longer for some better outcome. But with the young children that we have, there's a real tension, because they also are here at home needing and wanting the wholeness of us. And so, I had a business mentor one time. This was shortly after my daughter Grace was born. Grace is now, she turns 7 tomorrow, actually, and she's 6 as of tonight. And right after she was born, this business mentor of mine said, "Look, your bakery is not your baby." He said, "You have a baby. Her name's Grace. Your business is not your baby. Your business should be serving your baby." Right. And so I would say that was sometime around 2017. And did kind of shift our mindset to say, well, it kind of started off, I mean, in a way, as a passion project, right? This nostalgic idea of kolaches, and it was inspiring and nostalgic and kind of a passion project. But you get into it and you have these young children who are multiplying both in age and in quantity. And you realize, well, in some sense, this is my passion project. And so it's not to denigrate one or the other. They're both kind of mutually dependent on the other. But the temptation that I find is that each in their own right, the children and then the bakeries, which act like children sometimes, each set don't really know how to curb themselves. And if you don't know who you are and what you're doing, each will try to dominate the whole of you. The work will dominate the whole of you because it doesn't know how to do it otherwise, and the children will dominate the whole of you. So the tension is to try to serve both fully, without letting either utterly disrupt the other. Because the fact is, if I go unemployed, that's a major, major problem for the health and well-being of my children, which they don't fully understand. I'll be the first to admit we've not perfected that. On any given day, you might find me shirking my business duties because I want to spend time with my kids, and the next day you'll find me shirking my child duties because I'm stressed out by some perceived issue at work. So there's a lot of back and forth, but over time we've kind of the rudder moves not so wildly. It's moving more like this now, maybe. And so Lucy, I would say, is a great check and balance on me. I think she's a better balancer than I am, and I'm more of an extreme. So either all with the children or all the work, and she's constantly saying, no, it's got to be a balance of both, and pulling me back to that reality. And so she's a very faith-filled woman, very prayerful woman, more prayerful than I am, and is again always pulling me back to the why of what we're doing. And so that's my faith journey, as it were, with the business.
When you have your tough times, and I'm sure you have them maybe on a daily basis, what is sustaining you? What motivates you? Is it just your passion, or there is something else? Because again, you could sell your business and go back to CPA and maybe make more money and have more time for your kids and less concerns.
Yeah. I have several answers to that. So years ago, I had a friend as a priest, Father Joe Rogers. We were having a conversation one time, and Jay, I've maybe even shared this story with you, but we were speaking of all the various balances of life. So balances in work and family. In his case, he was studying theology and seminary life and prayer life and priestly life. And he just said, you know, Randy, in my experience, he was maybe 5 years older than I am. And he said, my experience is the temptation always to dispel the tension. You feel the tension, the default reaction is, I've got to get rid of the tension. And he said, my experience is just to try to hold the tension. So my first response would be, as you said, really, it was not daily. It's almost every other day. There's some tension that comes up. You just feel very pulled, and it's stressful, and it breeds stress and difficulty. But I guess I would say his advice, this is probably 10, 15 years ago, bears true in that you simply resist the temptation to just dispel the tension too quickly, to remain in the moment and to think the Lord knows what he is about. There's a famous prayer by St. Newman, Cardinal Newman, and he says, you know, the Lord may upend your whole world, but still he knows what he's about. So Lucy and I are confident that this is what we're doing now is not simply random, that there's some kind of providential guidance in this, and that we can fall back on the fact that this is not random. The Lord knows how we wound up here. He knows we've been doing this for many years. So Randy and Lucy, as we're speaking to ourselves, Randy, remain, right? Remain in the tension. That's my first response. My second response would be, of course, my children and my family are very much a guiding and inspiring part of this. When things are difficult with the work, just thinking. I heard recently a term of, I think they call it mental memory dividends. So if you have pleasant memories of your family or a special time with your son or daughter, you know, days, weeks, years later, you can recall that memory and you get this small little memory dividend, right? Like an investment. And I find that's true for me. So in difficult moments, I think, you know, my daughter will have this special little birthday treat tomorrow because of the work that I'm putting in, the sacrifice I'm putting in, or we can go to the certain school, or just simply I can have a moment of repose, you know, on Mondays, which are my day off. And so my children are kind of my second reason. And the third, I would say it's interesting. I picked this spot in my house because with many children, there aren't many places to go and to have some quiet. But I also enjoy this picture behind me. Of course, you can see it's starry night. You know, this picture, this painting inspires me for two reasons. One is because, of course, painting in itself by Van Gogh is a masterpiece. But secondarily, this reproduction is oil on canvas, and it's got some texture to it. It's not two-dimensional. It's got some texture, and so I always like it because it's almost as if you can see inside these homes and really wonder what these people are doing inside their homes and see the sky that way. And so I tell one of my managers who will likely be with me on this long journey in the bakery, he's now become a great ally. And I said, like this painting that has this texture that gives it such a depth. It's already a beautiful picture. Seeing it almost in 3D makes it that much better. I said, this work that I have now, even, and perhaps even most especially in its most challenging days, there's so much texture, right? It's so three-dimensional in a way that my previous job, mostly because of me, not because of the work itself was not meaningful, it was two-dimensional for me. That was my experience of it. There was not a lot of texture in the work I did. I appreciate it. I'm glad I did it. I still keep in touch with some people I worked with, but my subjective experience of it was just kind of two-dimensional. The work I have now is anything but two-dimensional. It's very three-dimensional. It's very textured. It's very earthy and real. So much so that sometimes you cut yourself, as it were, on the texture, right? You bleed from the texture. You trip up on the texture, right? But at the end of the day, it's still deep in its meaningfulness, in its rootedness, and its earthiness. And so you could never get to the end of the day and say, I feel like I really just pushed paper around all day, or I feel like I just I really didn't even do anything. I just kind of sat around. There's no sitting around. And so obviously for me personally, experiencing that, having these kind of connections in my mind and in my heart are what let me feel like the Lord has brought me to this path for a reason, and this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And concretely, in the moment when things are hard, I can rest on that, right? And say, okay, live the tension. Number two, think of your children and your family and what this work can give to them. Once in a blue moon, I'll even bring them to the bakery early morning, and that's a great thrill for them to watch Dad bake and even get their hands on it. That's a great thrill. And then again, thirdly, it's just the meaningfulness, the texture, the earthiness, the rootedness of this work. It's never dull, in both directions. Excruciating on its worst days, but euphoric on its best days.
So last question. Does Grace get a birthday cake or a kolache?
Well, she's getting a birthday cake. Lucy's already made it. Tomorrow it's a koala themed birthday. The big joke in our house though is I'm a pie person. I like pie. So half our family likes a birthday pie and half the family likes a birthday cake. So we all love kolaches. When it comes to birthdays, that's the big battle. And tomorrow we're doing cake, which is great. But I'm a pie guy. So the birthday after, hopefully I'll get a slice of some kind of pie.
Well, wish her happy birthday.